Hey, welcome back to a special edition of It's a Football Thing. As always, I'm your co-host, RJ the Balanced Blue, joined by Scott, my fellow Macarthur Bulls Tragic, and we are joined by a very special guest under very special circumstances, I might add. But Tom, just to cut through the ice, do you want to just give yourself a quick intro and just let people know where they can find your work, mate?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a freelance football journalist, mainly covering Australian football, but taking a keen interest in football all across the world. Work primarily at the moment for Kick 360 and Scouted Football, an organisation in the United Kingdom that focuses on player profiles for young players. So do a bit of Australian stuff for them, which is cool. And then you can find me, Tom Williams Pole, on Twitter.
Beautiful. And we have included Tom's details in the description. So make sure you check out Tom's work. Scott and I and our other co-host, Rob, who's also a big Manchester United fan and a Wanderers fan talking domestically. Big supporters of Tom and the work, great work he does. Let's rewind the clock. It's Saturday night. I'm sitting down, enjoying my football. Then the Bulls group chat that Scott and I are part of is going off like a frog in a sock. Andy Harper said Dwight's on the way out. And we're like, what is going on? And lo and behold, we get the website message from the Bulls. The club agrees to part ways with Dwight to allow him to pursue other opportunities. It was insane, boys. Absolutely insane. Now, we brought Tom on board because Scott and I are a lot of things, but we're not objective when it comes to the topic of the Macarthur Bulls. But Tom, just talk us through your emotions when you saw all of that news unfolding.
I thought it was a really bizarre thing to just come out of nowhere. That was my first reaction. I didn't expect it. And especially given the circumstances around Macarthur this season, I don't think, even though they had a really successful Australia Cup campaign, obviously Dwight Yorke was at the center of that, did some great things there before the season had started. But I still don't think anyone really had Macarthur as probably one of the teams they expected to challenge for the title. I think most people before the season were saying it was going to be Melbourne Victory, Western United, Melbourne City up there again. So given that they sort of, I wouldn't say underperformed, but they hadn't overperformed or underperformed really. They were probably in that mid-table area where a lot of people expected Macarthur to be. To see Dwight Yorke on the way out with those results in mind, I thought was a bit bizarre. And obviously there's been some less than good results recently. I think they've lost the last two games now, but it's not as if there's a crisis unfolding at Macarthur in terms of their performances on the pitch. I think they probably could have defended better. They lost 4-0 a few weeks ago now, but on the whole, I think there's been some pretty promising signs from Macarthur on the field. Whether that's Dwight Yorke or whether it's the players, it's sort of hard to quantify. It always is. When you see play or teams performing well, you're not sure whether it's due to the coach or due to the players. And Macarthur have a lot of good attacking players, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, my first reaction was more it was a little bit strange.
Absolutely. And Scott, we're going to reel you in here in a moment because you look at the circumstances. He was brought in on a 2-year deal, announced last May. Scott and I attended the inaugural Australia Cup victory for the mighty Macarthur Bulls, and there's all positive signs. And Tom, you correctly highlighted the indifferent or mixed form. We find ourselves in 6th position, 1-5, lost 6, drawn 2, in the top 6. So very much in alignment with realistic expectations, I think it's fair to say, even though some of the football at times has been a little bit underwhelming and some of the tactical decisions and in-game changes have raised some question marks here and there. But Scott, I know you were over in the countryside and your internet was a little bit questionable, to say the least. Talk me through your reaction, mate, because I know you have some very strong feelings on the topic.
Yeah, look, I was, mate, 7 hours into the middle of New South Wales at my sister-in-law's farm, so couldn't even watch. I couldn't even watch our match, and I was getting the odd message. Look, I was shocked, but in saying that, there's just been this feeling like on match day and kind of in the stands that it's not all happy. You looked at him on the sideline, he didn't look happy. I think there was stuff brewing with him and Arzani, our best player for me. And everyone knows I've got an Arzani agenda. I'm as biased as they come with him. I think he's a brilliant player, and I'm so happy he's in the league. But he couldn't get on. Dwight, to me, looked really unhappy. And then we got these rumors about some comments in the dressing room that I'm sure we'll touch on about, him giving the team a spray and saying it's a pub team and mediocre substandard. For me, I've no issue with players getting a spray. If you're underperforming, a manager has the right to give the team a spray, because that's the world we live in, and that's part of the business. Because when a team's not performing, it's usually the coach who cops it first. So I have no problem with Dwight giving the team a spray. Some of the rumored language in that spray, I can understand how higher ups at the club maybe didn't enjoy that. But I just think this is one of those situations that spiraled out of hand really, really quickly. And once something starts to spiral, it's hard to draw it back. Tom, I want to ask you, in regards to those alleged comments that came out in the dressing room, and we'll probably never know, but if that's true, do you think Dwight took it too far?
My personal view on that is it's a little bit too far, just because I 100% agree. The coach, absolutely, after a poor result as well, you've got to give the players a spray. That's just the realities of professional football. Even we saw with the A-League's All Access earlier this season, sometimes it's the players giving their own teammates a spray. It's just part of football, really. But I think when you've got especially higher ups of the club in the dressing room for that, it seems like it was maybe even being directed more towards the higher ups than it was towards the players themselves, as if to say that the professionalism of the club isn't up to scratch. And I think there's probably a valid argument in that, not only at Macarthur, but across the league, in terms of some of the standards across the A-League, in terms of, one, clubs don't really prepare enough for the future in terms of giving players really short-term contracts. There's not enough youth players getting opportunities. A-League coaches seem to prefer to play tried and tested players, even when they're underperforming, in favour of young players, which I think is symptomatic of some sort of lack of professionalism and lack of forward thinking in the A-League ecosystem, and also a lack of acknowledgement that the A-League's role in the football ecosystem is to develop young players, try and sell them for profits overseas, because a lot of these clubs can't make money for themselves because they don't own their own stadiums. They don't own the gate receipts or the entirety of the gate receipts from these stadiums. So that's a mechanism through which they can generate revenue for their club. But I think with the comments themselves, they just, I think, probably crossed the line that extra bit, given that the higher ups of the club were there. I think in a professional environment, I think it's probably, there's probably better ways to deal with that than bringing it out directly after a game when all the players are there, when all of the higher ups of the club are there. I think probably could have had them later on or something like that.
Yeah, no, good points. And Dave brought up a good point here about a results-driven decision, and I understand the broader context, and we are led to believe that it was, inflamed due to those comments. But I suppose looking from the outside in, and you really want to dissect this as close as you can, because things were going reasonably well. This was good from a PR perspective. He's a notable figure. Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson was brought down here recently, which only boded well for the club's overall appeal to a wider audience. I kind of look at it critically and think to myself, surely that one isolated incident in itself was enough to tip the scale to make that pretty materially large decision. So I kind of see it that it was probably a smoking gun, but I probably think, look at the wider backdrop. Sydney FC, the big elephant in the room, they're struggling. Dwight was a huge figure for that club. They are the glamour club, at least from a New South Wales point of view. I wonder if the club was just trying to get on the front foot and look for, not an excuse, but a justifiable reason to say, okay, we know you're going to get approached by Sydney at some point. You've just triggered and inflamed the comments. This is a really good opportunity now to cut ties, to use that as our excuse.
Well, Sydney
Scott,
FC even want him, though. I mean, look,
it's a good question. Good question.
Everyone's making out that he is just going to strut into the Sydney FC job. Now, Sydney FC as a club have very high standards. Haven't been hitting them. Let's be real. Haven't been hitting them recently. I'm sure they expect much better. I don't know how Corica's still there. To be completely to be completely honest. But people are making out that Dwight's just going to stumble into this job easily. I'm not so sure. I mean, let's be real. We won the Australia Cup. We had a good cup campaign against Sydney United in that final. We were far from, completely dominant. We didn't blow them off the park. The season so far has been a mixed bag. I still don't think, as we said in our match reactions, I don't think that Dwight had quite unlocked the squad fully. It seemed like he didn't know what to do with Arzani or didn't want to do anything with Arzani. Our attack is quite sporadic. We defensively looked okay, but I don't think he's blown people's minds with how well he's done at Macarthur. That he just strut into a Sydney FC job. So I don't know, Tom.
Oh, would you say he's doing better than Steve Corica? I suppose is question one.
Mate,
And does
I'm
he add
doing
up a
better than
value?
Steve Corica on Football Manager at the moment. So I mean, that's probably not. If that's Sydney FC's benchmark for their next manager, that they can drive down to the Oran Park Rovers down the road, and they'll probably find a few gaffers who are doing better. And it's a shame because Steve Corica seems like a really nice guy and good player, but this is a results business in football. And is he doing better? Yes, but is he going to take Sydney FC to what they're expecting? Who knows? Who knows? And Adam joining us all the way from Malta at the moment. We won't talk about the Manchester United result. Adam will leave that one for now. But Tom, do you think Sydney FC will automatically want Dwight Yorke?
So, yeah, it's a really interesting question because a lot of the rhetoric surrounding this topic seemed to revolve around Corica being sacked and then Dwight Yorke going into the Sydney job, but I can't really see that happening, to be honest. I just don't know why Sydney, obviously sacking Corica, sure. I feel like if there's any next manager to go, it would probably be him because Sydney have been nowhere near the levels that they set themselves. But why would you sack Corica and then sign Dwight Yorke when Dwight Yorke hasn't really this is a weird thing with Macarthur. He hasn't overperformed, he hasn't really underperformed. There's been good performances.
Doing okay.
Yeah, he's doing okay. It's not as if he's been incredibly good and that Sydney are one of the three biggest clubs in the league. What has Dwight Yorke done to suggest that they should go sack their manager and grab Dwight Yorke straight away? It seems really bizarre to me. I personally can't see it happening, but if it did happen, that would be an absolutely crazy.
I suppose we've got to ask ourselves the question, though, at least publicly, it's by mutual agreement, okay? So we just take it on face value. It's mutual agreement. There was an apparent disagreement, but they mutually agreed to terminate things. If I'm Dwight Yorke, I'm at the infancy stages of my managerial career. You're not languishing at the bottom. You're still in finals contention. Why would you mutually agree to leave if you haven't got something else lined up? And maybe there is a good point that Shane brought up about an overseas job. It just seems odd. The whole thing's bizarre, of course, but it would seem odd if he walks away from something that's still in the infancy phase and hasn't got a fallback plan here. So, yeah, it's fascinating to me. But looking ahead, apparently, Miles Stojovski, they're looking to him now. Obviously, he's got a direct connection, and it is wrapped up now.
We've got an email, RJ, members' email saying.
Oh, I was watching the show. I was watching the show, Scott. I didn't have time to read the email.
No, that's right, mate. I'm a good multitasker, except if you ask my wife. It says Macarthur's pleased to announce the appointment of Miles Stojovski as head coach. The former Socceroo star becomes the first coach to develop through the club's pathways. Then it goes on to talk about how he's been part of the club. He's had a big influence on the first team. And he's basically said, I want to build on what the club started this season, and there won't be any change to our objective of playing finals football, which I like that. That's all good press. And Neil Simon's popped that in the chat first. So big ups to Neil. He got that news in there quickly.
As always.
Beautiful.
Yeah, he's fast, man. He's fast.
Mate. He's fast, mate. Faster than the press. But I tell you what, it's just interesting. So first, we'll go to you, Tom. What do you think about Macarthur's decision, the timing of it, the overall process, and just any reflections you have on Mile for Macarthur?
I think it's really good. I think as a matter of principle, I always prefer having Australian coaches in this league, just because I think in general, I don't think our coaches get the sort of love that they deserve. I think we've seen with Ange Postecoglou, with Kevin Muscat, even Ufuk Talay, what he's doing at Wellington, that our coaches do have the actual talent. And on the same level, why, like, it's a bit of a different situation with Dwight Yorke because he's a new coach. But for me, if a European coach or an overseas coach isn't deemed good enough to coach over there, why are they coming to the A-League to like coach here when we could have our own coaches and develop them and allow them to develop their own philosophy, that sort of thing? It's a bit of a conundrum for me. And I think we've seen a lot of overseas coaches absolutely bomb it in this league, like be really poor. Like Marco Kurtz at Victory, he was all right at Adelaide, but he was poor at Victory. We've seen Babel at Wanderers, wasn't very good. Carl Robinson as well. I mean, he was okay at Newcastle, not anywhere near as good at Wanderers. So we've seen a lot of foreign coaches like pretty much suck in this league. So I think it's great have an Australian coach. You probably give a few of the younger boys a bit more of an opportunity as well. I think it's good that the likes of Jake Holman and Jonathan Aspropodimidis and these types of guys have had opportunities. But maybe there'll be some of those other young players like Jed Drew might be able to come through and improve a bit more.
Lockie Rose.
Yeah, Lockie Rose. I really hope that that'll be the case with Stajovski at the helm. And even Arzani. Arzani's not even that old, really. Like, he's not a young player anymore, but I'd really love to see him starting games and performing well again, because even in the cameos off the bench, he's been good. That's why it's been a little bit bizarre to me that he hasn't really been playing that much.
Scott's burning, Tom. You're setting him. I can feel the heat. We live close to each other, and I can feel the heat. Because I'm trying to be balanced. I know. I've been trying to say, I'm trying to defend poor Dwight. I can say this now. I've tried to say, oh, look, maybe it's because he's trying to come on against tired defenders. He's not the hardest worker in the room.
It's too good to be an impact player.
Scott, he's very, very defensive about young Daniel. So I'm glad that you triggered him there, Tom. So good stuff.
And Tom's wearing a Messi jersey as well. We know
he's a winner.
I feel like Tom's winding me up today, but that's all right. He's a good fella.
Nah, we wouldn't do that.
No, look, it's exciting, Stajovski there. Obviously, I think a club like Macarthur, who is still growing, it's no secret that we'd all like more bums on seats at the games. I think from a marketing, just to kind of wrap up my thoughts on it, I feel like from a marketing perspective, attention perspective, losing Dwight is going to hurt. Yeah, I think losing him does do us some harm, but hopefully it's short-term pain for long-term gain, because Stajovski, I think if he can meet the expectations, is someone who'll stick around for a while, be pretty loyal, and the players know as well. And I think it will be good for some of these young Aussie players to have Stajovski there, someone who's been a big part of the national setup. So, look, negative for us that we lose him. Hopefully the positive is that we've got some stability, consistency, and someone who can free my man, Daniel Arzani.
Free Daniel, Tom.
Just to add to that, like I have never been to a Macarthur home game. I've been to a couple of Macarthur games in Sydney.
Missing out, Tom.
It's definitely on the bucket list.
We'll take care of you when you do, mate. Don't worry.
But from what I see from the outside looking in, it seems like Macarthur is really trying to embrace that sort of community and that area in that community. So I think what could be really good to see is maybe some younger players from that community, sort of similar to what Central Coast do. And I think Central Coast do a really good job of embracing that community vibe. And it feels really authentic because you've got players from Gosford and players from all those surrounding areas playing for the senior team. And I think it would be really cool to have that, because then you can get around those sorts of players if they stay at the club for longer. Even you look at Lockie Rose, for example, he's been there since the start of the club, really. And he's been all the way through. I think he just signed a new deal until like 2025 something as well. So I think having players like that who can forge somewhat of a legacy at the club is a really cool thing. And I think hopefully Stajovski can give some of these players more opportunities and really build that core of young players and embrace the community nature of the club.
Beautiful. And just I suppose from my point of view, I look at these recent events as being perhaps a necessary shock to the system. The timing is ill, I would say, but sometimes you don't get to pick and choose when you have to adapt. And the good thing, at least if I'm being optimistic, is Bulls are in a good enough position to keep themselves in contention for still competing in the finals. They've acted swiftly to bring in someone that understands the club's fabric and culture and has that relationship. So you minimize the amount of uncertainty and speculation trying to find a caretaker and a coach after that, but also someone that knows the culture of the club, knows the players, and therefore continues our quest for that finals appearance. But I suppose the one thing that makes me a little bit nervous is that Dwight would have undoubtedly forged some relationships with some of our better players, and people that I'm thinking off the top of my head are people like Daniel Da Silva. These are kinds of players that when they're not there, they are very noticeable to what we're missing. So from my perspective, thank you very much, Dwight, for what you've done, but please don't poach any of our players. Scott, any final thoughts? And then I'll pass on the last word to Tom.
No, look, if he's going abroad, going back home, I wish him well. If he's going to Sydney FC, can't do that. It's not a derby to them, but to me, they're rivals, man. So, look, this whole thing has been, I would just use the word unfortunate. I don't think anyone wins out of this. I don't think it helps Dwight's reputation. It certainly doesn't help the club. I don't think it's a great look for the league to have this kind of infighting. Look, it's no one's winning. I'm just happy now Stojovski's been announced, and we can hopefully just move forward and keep the boys focused on finals football, because that's the goal. So
well said, man. There's two sides to every story, in which, what do they say? Don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. But on that note, Tom, any final reflections before we say goodbye and thanks very much?
Yeah, I'd just love to see what Macarthur do for the rest of the season, because I think there's been some really positive signs about what they can do. If you get the whole front four of Craig Noon, Arzani, Davila, and Arabuli onto the pitch at the same time, I think that attack could probably wreak havoc in this league. And then you look at Jake Holman, what he's doing in midfield at the moment. I think it's been really good to see. Yep. Chuck Danny Da Silva and Kieran Backus in there. It's a pretty good core of a team. And I think if they get that defensive solidity as well, I think you've got a lot of firepower moving forward to score a lot of goals in this league. So I hope Stojovski tries to prioritize a really attacking way of playing. I think it would be really entertaining to watch, even just if he lets Arzani and Noon just stay high on the wings and go to town 1v1 on their direct players. I think that would be so cool.
Spot on.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of core of a team and entertaining to watch, I think us three, we fit the criteria for that, lads. And again, on behalf of Scott and Rob, our other co-host, who's not on this particular show, just want to extend our sincere thanks again, Tom, for your excellent debut appearance, hopefully the first of many. And we wish you all the best for your current work endeavors, and hope we can get you back on next time, my friend.
Cheers. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And to everyone in the live chat as well, don't forget to subscribe. If you're new to the channel, make sure you smash that like button on the way out. The boys are working hard. Robbie and I were doing a match preview for Arsenal and United last night. We did that. Check that out. We've just done this stream, and we'll be back live at 8:30 p.m. tonight to look back at all the action from the English Premier League. Tom, I have to ask you before I let you go, because I'm a bit of a bugger. How you feeling about that Arsenal-Manchester United result, legend?
Oh,
I have to ask.
Not good. But look, we'll see. There's a lot of season to still play out. So, yeah, we'll see how it all goes.
That's it. RJ, let you wrap this bad boy up, man.
Sorry about that, Tom. Ever since you wore that Arsenal jersey, mate, he was going to come in swinging. So I apologize for the poor behavior from Scott. But until then, guys, thank you very much for joining, and let's catch you next time, guys. All the best.